The billionaire, Alexander Grant, was a man everyone in the city admired and feared at the same time. He had built his empire from nothing, turning a small family store into a global business worth billions. His staff at the mansion always looked at him with respect, but deep inside, Alexander wondered, did they respect him as a person, or only as their wealthy boss? One evening, as he sat alone in his massive study, he leaned back in his leather chair and thought about loyalty. People around him always seemed to smile, but he knew money had a way of buying fake smiles. That night, he came up with a plan to test the hearts of those closest to him. The next morning, Alexander walked into the grand dining hall where his staff was already gathered. The maid, Clara, a quiet young woman who had only been working at the mansion for 6 months, stood nervously by the corner, holding a tray of tea. The butler, the cook, and 2 housekeepers all looked up as Alexander entered. He placed his sleek black credit card on the table and said with a calm but sharp voice, "Each of you may take this card today. Use it however you like. No limits. I want to see what each of you chooses when given unlimited wealth." The staff exchanged shocked looks. Unlimited. A billionaire's card? It was beyond imagination. Some of them gasped with joy, while others hid their excitement behind polite smiles. Clara, however, froze. She stared at the card, then at Alexander. Why would he do this? Surely, there was a catch. Alexander's eyes swept over them, but he kept his face unreadable. "Each of you will take a turn," he continued. "No rules. No instructions. Just make your choice." The butler went first. He used the card to buy himself an expensive watch, a brand he had admired for years but could never afford. The cook ordered a luxury kitchen appliance for her home. One housekeeper splurged on a designer handbag, and the other booked herself a spa weekend at the city's most prestigious resort. Alexander watched each transaction silently, noting every choice. He had expected this, greed dressed up as reward. But his eyes kept drifting toward Clara, the maid who still hadn't touched the card. When it was finally her turn, she hesitated, shaking her head. "Take it," Alexander urged, sliding the card toward her. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She looked at him, then at the card again. Her mind raced. She could buy herself a new wardrobe, jewelry, or even a vacation she could only dream of. But her heart ached for something else. With quiet steps, she walked away and returned only hours later. When Clara finally handed the card back, Alexander noticed she hadn't bought anything for herself. Instead, she had gone into the city's poorest district. There, she purchased groceries, warm clothes, and medicines for children in an orphanage. She had used the billionaire's wealth not for her desires, but for strangers who had nothing. Later that evening, Alexander sat in his study once more, reviewing the card transactions. His staff's purchases didn't surprise him, but when he saw Clara's expenses, he froze. Groceries. Children's coats. Hospital bills. Toys. All for others, none for herself. Something inside him broke. For years, he had been surrounded by people who only cared about his fortune, not about him as a human being. Yet here was a maid, a poor girl with no wealth, no privilege, no security, who had been given the key to unlimited riches and chose compassion over greed. The next morning, Alexander called Clara into his office. She entered nervously, holding her hands tightly together. "I'm sorry if I did something wrong with your card, sir," she whispered, lowering her gaze. He stood and walked around the desk until he was standing just inches from her. "Why didn't you buy something for yourself?" he asked softly. Clara's lips parted, but she struggled to speak. Finally, she said, "Because I already have a roof over my head, food to eat, and a job to be grateful for. But those children at the orphanage, they have nothing. If I was given a chance to make a difference, even a small one, I couldn't waste it on myself." Alexander's chest tightened. He had tested her, expecting selfishness, but what he found was purity. His entire life, he had been chasing wealth, thinking it was the answer. Yet here stood a maid who reminded him of the truth he had forgotten. Kindness and selflessness were worth more than billions. Without realizing it, his voice broke as he whispered, "You broke my heart, Clara, not with betrayal, but with kindness I didn't think still existed." Her eyes widened in shock, tears forming as she realized her choice had moved him. She had expected anger, but instead she saw vulnerability in the man the world called cold and ruthless. From that day on, Alexander couldn't look at Clara the same way. He found himself seeking her presence, listening to her quiet words, and admiring the way she treated everyone with respect. She didn't know it, but she had shaken the billionaire's entire world, and though the test had begun as a trick to expose greed, it ended as the moment Alexander Grant realized that true wealth wasn't measured in money, but in hearts like Clara's, pure, giving, and unshakably kind.